Well, welcome to List and Sell Online, the next installment number 3, which is, of course, stabilising your buyers. And this has been an interesting scenario, this COVID-19. And I've got to congratulate everybody who's either watching the recording of this or listening into it now for not sitting at home and playing Scrabble, but having a go. And I know that might seem like a bit of tongue-in-cheek criticism, but the number of agents that have literally just taken a back seat and parked and waiting for, figuratively speaking, the storm to pass is astounding. I can tell you the next few weeks are going to be relatively trying, but if you follow the lead that we give you here today, I can almost indefinitely assure you that what stands ahead of you is probably an opportunity, the likes of which you're not likely to see again. Not wanting to sound like a dinosaur, but I go all the way back to the early 90s, and I'm not saying that this market's going to be identical. In fact, I'm tipping that it might be, or the fallout at least might be a little bit worse. But having said that, I can almost assure you that I'm very familiar with the terrain. I'm very familiar with what is likely to be in front of us and some of the measures that we're going to have to take over these next few weeks to ensure that we're in the best position to take full advantage of it. And when I look at some of the things that I'm hearing out there, and the point is, and I really want us to be fully aware of this as well, inside the real estate space, is that at the moment, it's purely and simply about setting yourself up to get through this incremental change, the survive part. And the survive part's a little bit panicky. It's a little bit of unknown territory, and we've got to remain versatile. I mean, I can tell you now, there's several things that I just keep changing almost on a daily basis as I see little things get in the way. But as I was saying to somebody this morning, to me, it's not much more than an obstacle that we need to get around. In fact, I'm very heartened by some of the news that I'm seeing around COVID. And I think that the period where we do go into what I'm effectively calling the doldrums won't be nearly as bad as we first anticipated. Having said that, it is going to be a difficult period. There is going to be a period that we go through in the not too distant future. I reckon you're probably about a week to 2 weeks away, where the buyer inquiry is not just going to dry up. You're still going to see them there, but they won't be active in the market or as active as we'd like. And of course, sellers, which we're about to talk about today, stabilising, they too might unhinge if you're not careful. So I want to talk very much about that, and we'll move into that space right now with, where are you? Okay. The survive, then thrive theme of COVID-19. And basically, we want to talk about stabilising your sellers. And when I talk about stabilising them, there'll be a whole range of things that are going through their minds from their perspective on what's going on in this market, what's likely to unfold inside this market. And pretty much a lot of them are in a space where they've got to make decisions and are not quite sure how to go about it. So there's lots of speculation, loads of speculation as to what's right and what's wrong about this particular market. And I have got to say that for the most part, some of the speculative thoughts that I've heard are a little bit polarized for my liking. Suffice to say, the market's got to go on. Suffice to say that, there are sellers out there that literally have to sell right now, and there are certainly buyers that are in the same position. So your role, as I see it, insofar as sellers go, is to responsibly and empathetically communicate. And please, if you're sitting watching this, write that word empathy down, and right next to it, write with, and then beyond that, write sympathy. You've got to employ empathy without sympathy. Now, many of you over the years have heard me call that the it factor. That's the thing that separates the great real estate agents from the ordinary. those ones that are in a great capacity, they have the ability to very naturally empathize with someone's situation, but they never fall into the trap of sympathizing it. And now more than ever, that's going to be the case. And I hasten to add that even for the best of the best, it's difficult at times. But understand, the moment you fall into a sympathetic disposition, your sense of logic leaves you. With your sense of logic out of the way, you're in a dangerous position where you're starting to look at illogical solutions to a problem. And there is some pretty straightforward logic that can be applied around what's happening in this market now and what's likely to happen. So we say your role is to responsibly and empathetically communicate the transfer of relevant market information. And that by far and away is the most important thing. Now, relevant market information does include speculation. What could happen? What might happen? What's most likely to happen? But in order to actually get those messages across in stabilising our sellers, you've got to have a very strong relationship. They simply have to trust the advice that you're giving. For a long, long time at List and Sell, I've been saying, give advice, stay away from price. Now more than ever, I can't hasten to add that stay away from price, because there's no good news where price is concerned. The honest truth, if agents are to be upfront, we don't really know where price is going to go. We can speculate, but we can't give any advice with any clarity on the issue of market value. Yes, we can cite comparative value, but even those figures have been undermined by what's happened in the market. It's transgression in a very short space of time. To property sellers, so they're able to make confident, informed decisions. What your sellers need now more than ever is an agent that listens to what their motives are with empathy, and then discusses a range of options that they have to solve that problem. So many of them are throwing their hands in the air. I know that you've probably been through this and saying this is all too hard and withdrawing their property from the market. We want to avoid that. The key to a trusted relationship selling is taking an empathetic disposition and listening intently to these people. Now, the why I keep doing this and why I'm framing it up for is there's a strong likelihood with some of these people, these in particular property sellers, that you'll be talking to for weeks on end, and it will seem almost fruitless, like nothing's likely to happen. You're not likely to get the property. But I've got to tell you, now more than ever, it's the same consistent piece of advice I've always given you in every market: get more listings. Notwithstanding that I'm not saying they've got to bank buyers, which you actually look at the last recording, I'm saying that you need to build a stack of buyers. But our ultimate aim is to have a stack of prospective sellers, a stack of prospective buyers, and then we kind of play matchmaker and put them together. Now, that's not to say that the sellers over here are not going to be maybe over expected with what the property might want to fetch, and the buyers might be a little bit too unrealistic about they might want to pay. But never forget, we're still in the business of selling homes, and what comes with that, it's a different kind of pitch, a different kind of sale. People buy emotionally. So no matter how bad the market gets, if somebody doesn't like a property, they're not likely to buy it. And if someone loves the property, are they likely to pay a premium? Yeah, pretty much so. But we know that the market's going to slide, so that's a whole different ballpark. So far to this COVID-19, I've seen largely reactive responses. And in fact, on Facebook, on commentary, a couple of people speculated even through private messages. They said, why is it taking you kind of like a week or so to respond as heavily as you did? And that was because I was responding about these agents that are offering online market appraisals that they can do in a few minutes, with the very thing that we detested that the banks were doing, that they're now offering to people. And I just laugh, I scoff when I see it. I say, look, you get a market appraisal today, or somebody says to you right now, what's my property worth? It's going to be pretty much, well, what time is it? Because I will reckon we'll get to a stage where, I know I'm probably overcooking it here, but properties will be dropping by the day, at least every 24 hours. So I say in stabilising your sellers, you could go one of the two ways. You could be largely reactive. They're freaking out. The market's freaking out. The buyers are freaking out. You can try and put Band-Aids on it. Or you can look at systematic, proactive protocols. Look at the problem logically, and then sit down and design some effective solutions that are going to keep the wheels turning, that are going to give those wheels then some momentum, and means that you could then capitalize, if you're ahead of the game, to take advantage or capture a larger market share, which might have been denied to you prior to this, the COVID-19 thing coming on. So which of the two? Let's have a look at some of the reactive responses that I'm seeing, and some of you might even be engaging in these. Please don't look at what I'm about to tell you and feel criticized, because that's not what I aim to do. I look at some of the things and I think naturally that might have been a thought as to why someone would do it, but we have to look at the anecdotes, for want of a better word. We need to be able to look at what are the ramifications of taking these courses, taking these paths. So the virtual open home seems like a good idea. Can't get people to a welcome home, so why don't we run a virtual open home? Well, the thing that I don't like about that is that in a lot of cases, you're not necessarily capturing the inquiry data. And as it falls to buyers, it's imperative that we're able to get the inquiry up. So in the last webinar that I did, I talked about this with buyers, and I said we need to start to learn to advertise property. And in advertising, we've got the sole purpose of generating inquiry, generate that inquiry to get the details of those buyers, and then qualify those buyers somewhat and bank them for later on. The virtual home, sadly, open home, sorry, many instances doesn't necessarily do this, nor to do property videos, especially the extended version, in that they give away too much information, and we want to stay right away from those. The COVID-19 inspection protocols. Everybody was quick to say, this is how we get around the protocols. Everyone was very quick to say, come to our open homes and this is how to work, or we're safe and we're doing the hand sanitizing, or we're wearing the masks, or whatever the case might be. Look, I think those protocols are important, but I think pushing them, making them the initial point of contact can be quite daunting, can actually put people off. And there's already enough anxiety around the virus. There's already enough anxiety around how we actually function with this. No need to put that up first, make it look complicated, and dissuade anyone from actually having a look at property. So I'm not saying that you don't have to make them aware of those protocols, but first and foremost, you need to sell the spark. You need to entice the interest from the buyer, particularly those that are qualified, that have the capacity to buy or sell real estate, and get their details, because we're going into, as I say, this period, which is basically the doldrums. And during that period, you want to be building that list of prospective sellers and potential buyers and communicating with these regularly so that we can play that matchmaking thing that we just talked about a second ago. The online market appraisal, I've already thrown this one out there. Goodness me. And I've been saying it for years. What do you want? Listing presentations or market appraisals? If you're still sitting at your desk and the only way you can actually figure out how to get listing presentations, how to build a database, how to get prospects is to offer free market appraisals, I don't mean to be rude, but you are a dickhead if that's what you think is going to make it work. There is no value whatsoever in price. And as a real estate agent, if you're to be honest, if somebody says, what's your property, what's their property worth right now, the truthful answer is, apart from what time is it, I don't know. Nobody knows. We can all sit here and speculate. We can all, which is basically gambling. And that gives me the shits, because you're actually gambling with a property owner's future? The correct answer is we really don't know where it's going from here. I can only tell you where it's at right now and what the appropriate actions are around it. So please tell me, what is it that you're trying to do? The withdrawing, that should say withdrawn. I'm sorry about that. The withdrawn listings. We're seeing a lot of withdrawing, listings leaving the marketplace. And, some agents saying, well, that's okay because they were on the market for a couple of 100 days or they're just unrealistic. Do not give away the game on listings. For a start, I can tell you, anyone that's looking at coming onto this market or has been on the market for just a few weeks, I know I mentioned those over 200 days, but those ones that have been on now, who would pick now to put a property on the market? I can tell you, they either have a willingness to sell, but most certainly will have some sort of linked motive, which is suggesting that they've got to get the property sold. And in any event, one of the most important things, and I'm not talking about this today, but in prospecting, is maintaining presence in your marketplace. Now, a lot of that presence has been wiped off the ledger, mainly because you can't do open for inspections now. So we've got a great idea with the welcome homes and the pointer boards, open homes, I should say, for some of you that don't big green around this, and how we use the pointer boards to direct people to what we call our two-view websites, which are our individual property websites, and I'll get into that in just a moment. So if somebody withdraws, that doesn't mean that you lower the communication. In fact, you ramp it up. You need to be speaking to these people, every 3 or 4 days at the very least prior to them coming on the market. With sellers that do come onto the market, I want you speaking to them almost twice a day. I plead with you to do that, especially when you see some of the measures that we have to take with foresight to making sure that the cogs keep turning on sales. And this one's crept back in. I'm now seeing the advent of the discounting of fees. Well, I am absolutely horrified when I see this. Now more than ever, property sellers need competent real estate agents. And given that you are going to be subjected to probably, especially in the early days, lower turnover, do not discount fees and make what is already a dire situation into one that's diabolical. So please stay away from discounting fees. Understand that a fee is an incentive. Understand, because there's also going to be massive problems, and I haven't even put this down here, around marketing. Sellers aren't going to want to invest in marketing products for two reasons. One is they're going to see that it's futile and they're very thrifty, very dollar conscious of what they need to survive themselves. And secondly, they're probably going to put the heavy on you to pay. It's easy in a market that's just rising and rising in price, but one that we look like going into, that's not going to be the case whatsoever. These are reactive responses, and I can tell you that in most cases, they add up to what I refer to as the ready, fire, aim syndrome. I look at these, and I'm not saying they're altogether wrong, but with the virtual open homes, I would be looking at anything that was directing them to it, like a 15-second promo vid that more or less said, for more information, give us a call. You need to be getting the mobile telephone numbers and the email addresses of all these people that are inquiring, and then, on almost daily basis, following them up. And those that you qualify as good buyers, or some that you qualify as prospects, these need to be called, almost every other day, as we're nurturing that relationship, so that when things do clear, when the dust settles, they are then onto a space, and they are then in the space where you're the person they look to first, because you established that trusted relationship with them. All right, so what's this all built on? Well, I say we need to act. You know that I love acronyms, ACT. In stabilising the sellers, the first thing we have to do is anticipate many of the things, the thoughts and feelings that they're having. We need to look at it, as I said, empathetically, which means putting ourselves in their shoes and viewing the market, and then engage in some anticipative protocols that put us in a favorable position to eventually build that relationship. The second stage is communicating. It is purely and simply communication. And I don't mean talking to them. I don't mean talking at them. I mean communicating with them. And now you might say talking to them is the right way to go. Yeah, I get that coochie-coo feeling. But I mean, my understanding of successful communication is the successful transfer of relevant market information. When I say communication, it's not what is said, it's what's understood by what you say. It's to effectively get the ball over the net so that the recipient has to hit that back. So if we can be communicating strongly, especially around motives with property sellers, if we can be communicating with buyers and building that trusted relationship, as things start to free up, you're in the box office. And the third component is trust, is moving into a space where they totally trust you and trust the judgment that you have for them around the real estate space. Now, this is not going to come freely. So it always falls back to the frequency of communication. In the past, I've said in markets that are pretty much a seller's market, I've often been quick to say that you still need to call them every day. I say that you call them daily until they say, look, Mark, you don't have to call us anymore. This just eliminates the issue of infrequency of communication. Now, I think more than ever, you need to be calling them probably twice a day. Certainly those people that are already listed with you. And this is founded around not just giving good information, not just building a relationship, but just dispelling the anxiety, that's not COVID, the anxiety that's building on an almost daily basis. And we have to be incredibly conscious of this. You know, you look at it from the perspective of any seller that's out there. You know, they're not hearing from you. You're listed with them every day, but maybe your competitors are calling them collectively because of the scarcity of properties on the market themselves. Now, it might not be one of those agents. It could be any number of them. But if several of them are calling you, it just looks like all the rest. And here's me only calling you once every 2 or 3 days. Who am I going to believe on price? Who am I going to believe on the buyers that you have available? Who am I going to believe on your sales results? And who am I going to believe on your negotiation prowess, especially if my property's been sitting there and seemingly nothing's happening? In any event, even if I come back to you with the truth, as many agents pride them on, even if I come back and say I'm very realistic and this is what's really going on, and some agents won't tell you and all that blah, 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 it's still not going to solicit the answer that you want, because the relationship has not been forged. So a vast part of communication, the success of communication, is founded upon your ability to forge that relationship with them in the first instance. And from there, if that frequency of communication is there, if the content is valuable, is believed, then they move into the trust space and everything just gets better from there. So let's look at some proactive responses. Let's just look at a list of things that you can be doing right now to counter many of the reactive things, or if you like, the negative things that are transpiring inside the industry. So I say the first thing that we need to do in a proactive manner, so that other sellers see this and then are enticed to come back on the market, is to promote the sales activity. Now, this can be done in a number of ways. I just mentioned a few moments ago that you don't have the advent of open for inspection, so you're kind of denied the opportunity to put pointer boards up. Well, who says? Why can't we have pointer boards that lead and direct to a property that's for sale? Why can't we have on that pointer board, welcome to view? Now, to view is something I'm going to show you. All of you, if you haven't received it as yet, are able to access Property Marketer. On Property Marketer, we have the To View platform, which is the individual property websites, which costs you no more, and you can be uploading these properties to that reformatted To View website. That means you can have a pointer board out that says, here's the pointer board, it says welcome to view. And when you get to the sign, it says this is how you jump onto the individual property website. There was a massive uproar about this. I saw in some real estate Facebook pages recently. I've just seen that from one of our, because I don't want to dob you in, mate. There might be an uproar. So what? You can have pointer boards that lead to properties. People are able to drive around and view these properties from the outside. All you need to have on the signboard then is, for the full length to view video, please call a number or please hook on, and all they've got to do is surrender their details, and from those details, you are then able to give them, or you're able to, from those details, you're able to contact them, qualify them, and then we can bank those buyers. So the important thing is to promote sales activity, because what does this say to any incumbent sellers? What does this say to sellers that are on the market? That things are still moving. The most important thing you can be doing with your current sellers and any others that you're trying to entice onto the market, so your imminent sellers, your active property sellers, is showing them, promoting to them that sales are still being made, properties are still being transacted by far and away. Advertising for buyer inquiry. I've already said this, I mentioned it before, I'll just reiterate it again. With your ads, be very careful. The most important thing that you can do with property adverts to generate inquiry is understand that less is more. The less you say, the less you show, the more effective that ad is. You see, because the most important thing with an ad is not just creating a hook, not just having something that says, this is why you should look at it. So someone says, gee, that sounds good. They need to then have a photo that we say, gee, that looks good. But it's the things, it's the very things that you omit from that advertisement. So if you fail to tell them how many bedrooms it has, if you fail to tell them whether the pool is heated and salt water, and that can be something as simple as that, where the prospect, the buyer, makes the call to ask whether those things, or get some clarification, you go, I've got you. So an ad is not about giving information. An ad is about generating inquiry, which means an economy of words, and use largely pictures, so that someone looks at an ad and says either, gee, that looks good, gee, that sounds good, I wonder if, and then they take action. Okay, the marketing of accolades. So where you've had successes, you have to use the voice of those sellers to tell other sellers, hey, it's okay. Yes, COVID's in the way, but properties are still transacting. This helps sellers make the listing decision. This also helps buyers make the buying decision. Why? Because people do not like to be on their own. They hate to be the crash test dummy. They hate to be the one that's walking against the wheel, especially in the real estate market. So invariably, if you're clever enough to show them as much evidence as they need to be able to see the activity in the marketplace, boom, there it goes, it happens. An increased frequency of communication, most important thing. People are thinking things aren't happening. A seller says, oh, okay, it's all gone to shit. I'll just go and play Scrabble and tell me when it's over. And you as an agent go and do the same bloody thing. Instead of talking them off the wall. It's the frequency of communication that will make all the difference, first and foremost. Secondly, the quality of that communication. And I aim to show you how to deliver those both on a daily basis, hopefully twice a day. Most important thing, your willingness to listen empathetically. What do I mean by that? I know that for some of you, you might be sitting there going, where on earth is my next sale going to come from? How am I going to be able to afford to survive? Things like that, which means that you turn the receptors off because you're too engaged in your own issue. You must take interest in buyers and sellers to the nth degree. You have to go on to a call with the preparedness to LTB YTD. What does that stand for? Let them bore you, if necessary, to death. You have to listen and you have to be present in that conversation, because it's the listening and it's the presence that then allows you to pick up the clues to understand the story, to then provide the advice to get the property moved on. And last but not least, in the same way that we're looking at banking buyers, we also need to now be looking at banking listings. So some, no matter what conversations we have with them, and I'm going to share those conversations with you in the first instance, they still may elect to procrastinate and not put the property on the market for a couple of weeks. In fact, I was talking to a seller that I referred to an agent on the Gold Coast yesterday. Lay down misère sale, might I add. The owner of that property is willing to consider accepting what they put it on the market, I'm sorry, at the same price they paid for it. Now you might go, well, that might be a little bit over. Well, not really, because it was about 3 years ago, but is also fully conversant with the fact that they may have to accept $100,000 less on a property that's just over the $500,000 mark. So that's an owner that's prepared to engage and accept a number that's clearly already at the 20% hit on what they paid for it just a couple of years ago. Why is that? Well, I know why, because they had a long conversation with yours truly that made perfect sense. And that perfect, because the reason that conversation was accepted is that I have sold several properties for that client in the past. So when they rang me, I just went straight into it because the relationship is already there. And because the relationship's there, I can do and say things with that prospective client that I might not be prepared to say on first or initial contact with another. But that doesn't mean I don't know how to build that up. So what we're doing is we're just constantly engaging with sellers and building a bank of listings so that when the obstacle itself, we know how to navigate ourselves around that. When sellers come to the realization that prices have come off and they're going to be coming back, when buyers then have the confidence to see the prices, although they've come back, they've now got some stability and they jump in and start buying, whammo. So if you have the bank of sellers, if you have the bank of buyers, you win. I'm sorry to keep drumming this into you, but it is the single largest ingredient for you to glean success in the months and really the years ahead. If you get this right, what you will do as we come out of this is you will build market share that will resonate for years to come. So I say this over and over again, look at this as it looks like adversity, but believe you me, it's opportunity. Opportunity rarely comes wrapped with a tag that says opportunity. It looks like adversity most of the time. So to responsibly and empathetically communicate, we must ask ourselves the question regarding our property sellers. So if we move into the anticipative space, we really have to look at it from their perspective. And that question is simple. How would they be thinking and feeling about the marketplace in correlation to their motive? How do you think they might be feeling? Now, if the motive is an unknown quantity, but let's just run an assumption. They have to sell. How would you like to be in that vice right now? Can we safely assume that anyone that's volunteering this information around wanting to sell may well be in that predicament where they have to sell in a period of what is just obvious uncertainty? So please don't make assumptions about any of your sellers out there. Don't polarize them. Don't look at it and say they're not realistic. They probably don't want to sell. They want too much money. Just calm your farm. The most important thing for you now as an estate agent is to remain calm, stand back from the problem, look at the best solution, map out that solution, and just take those steps moving forward. But here's how I would be thinking and feeling. massive uncertainty. Massive uncertainty. Now, I'm an estate agent and I've seen this plenty of times, and I can tell you that if I had to sell, I would be rushing, I'd be tripping over my feet to get the property on the market right now. I would be panicked about what I might be losing on an almost daily basis by delaying that action. Yeah. Now, that's because of the privilege of working in real estate and the privilege of seeing this marketplace. But to an ordinary seller out right there right now, they're actually looking at it in a different way. They're looking at it saying, we need to sell in this market and there are no buyers. We can't actually sell it. We're screwed. Most likely. And this is bringing on anxiousness. This is bringing on a level of anxiety that's almost, probably scaring them into inaction. So we need to look at a solution around that again. So I say we want to responsibly and empathetically communicate. So ask ourselves the question regarding our property sellers. Oh, sorry, that was the same slide. I don't know how that came up. So I want to anticipate the timeline, and I've got to tell you this to you because many of you have seen this timeline that I share. So this is the original one, and this is where I talk about what you're thinking as opposed to what a seller might be thinking. So it is usually a protracted scenario. So when you first come on the market, sometimes we list them a little bit ambitious. We think it needs to be reduced. They think it's a bit too early. You hit about the 4-week mark. I can tell you the 4-week mark, most of your sellers are going into a state of apoplexy at the moment. But in the past, you get up to about 4 weeks, we sometimes think, well, it's still not that early days on the market. They're often thinking it should be sold. Get to the 6th week, we still think it's not long. They're going, something's wrong with the property. We get to about 8 weeks, we think, oh, this one's been around for a bit too long. I really must reduce the price. They're now thinking something's wrong with the agency. So they've moved on from the property being the issue. They're now looking at the agency itself. They're still not blaming you as an estate agent. You get to the 12-week mark and they're saying, or we're saying they're not motivated. They're saying there must be something wrong with the salesperson. It should be the 10-week mark. At 14 weeks, we're thinking, oh, shit, they're going to leave me. They're actually saying we need another agent. You get to the end of the agency, we say, I need to re-sign, and they say we have with another agency. That is pretty much out the window now. The only reason I showed you that is I want to show you how that contrasts with what's going on in the marketplace right now. So have a look at the timeline and have a look at the anxiety that many of your sellers, if not already, are most likely to go through if you bring these properties onto the market. And I've changed the top when we talk about what you're thinking. So hopefully you're still maintaining that empathetic disposition and not using feelings and not falling into the emotional trap, not falling into the emotional trap of sympathy. You're still thinking, but I can almost tell you now in this marketplace, most sellers are feeling their way through it. The anxiety is stemmed from them getting emotional. Now, it could be anything from lament. It could be that they missed the boat and they should have put the property on the market 3 or 4 weeks ago and they would have got out of it. And they would have dodged the bullet or whatever. Or all of a sudden, they've lost the job. They're not going to be able to service a mortgage. Allowing that to go on a mortgage holiday that will basically capitalize onto the loan value, and that could diminish their equity. So that's a problem. So here's how it's pretty much working. And I'll talk about from the get-go, from the start, we're thinking as they're coming on based upon what's going on in the marketplace. They've just got it priced too high. They're sitting there. What they're feeling is, I hope we get the price. I hope we dodge the bullet. I hope that, please, dear God, let me off the hook here and everything's going to be okay. Within a week, you might suffer, if not now, very soon, little to no inquiry. There's just not enough inquiry being generated. They're then thinking, because they look at inquiry as physical buyers, there's no one wants to buy the property. There's no buyers for this property. At the 2-week mark, you might be sitting there going, okay, well, I've really got to get this price back to make this happen. We've been on for 2 weeks. We've got nothing happening. The market's clearly coming back. These people aren't playing ball and need to get it back. They're now thinking we need to get X amount of dollars. They might have moved into a space where they're a bit conservative and the asking price might be a little bit higher than what they're prepared to accept, but they're now into what I refer to as need thinking we need a certain amount of dollars. At the 4-week mark, you could be thinking, oh, they're going to withdraw. It's all too hard. They're going to pull it off. Now, please do not make this assumption, especially with any new listings going forward. Who would choose this market to sell that wasn't motivated to sell? Do not fall for the trap of we've decided, we've changed our mind, hand it over, and then they go and list it with another agent. Do not do that. Engage with these people. Talk to all of them. So when talking to the sellers in terms of frequency, do not discriminate. Do not decide that this agent, that this listing is more motivated than this, that this seller is more cooperative than the other. Just make the assumption they all want to sell. I think it's a safe assumption in this marketplace that we're into at the moment, and treat them equally. So you're thinking they're going to withdraw. They're thinking maybe there's something wrong with the property. At the 6-week mark, you then move into, oh, they're not motivated. They then start thinking there's something wrong with you. Why? Because you're probably demonstrating that. If it's not in facial expressions, if it's not in the infrequency they're seeing you, it's probably with the once a week or twice a week call that doesn't demonstrate to them that you're enthusiastic about selling. And one of the two most key components to selling real estate, enthusiasm and confidence. You have to be brimming out of your skin. You have to be like a cat eating it to make it work. We get up to the 8-week mark. We start to think, oh, they're going to leave me. And they're maybe thinking, do we need a better agent? Do we need someone else? Is it time someone else had a crack? Is it time we gave this different perspective because maybe you're not telling them what they need to hear? At the 10-week mark, you start panicking. Oh, I need to get this one sold. I need the sale. I need the deal. They go, yeah, we're giving another agent a go. This can happen. So understand the timeline, but what I want you to see here is, can you see the anxiety that is attached to this? So these sellers, to overcome this, they need a frequency of communication that has been unprecedented to date. Yes, you need to call them every 2 days. Yes, they need to see evidence of all the sales that your agency is making in real time, preferably with SMS technology, with texts. They need to see evidence of other sellers singing your praises and explaining how, no matter what the adversity that's been thrown at you, you are still managing to list and sell real estate. You see, again, I say that people are like sheep. Sellers are like sheep. They see one do it, they all fall into play, and off we go. So we're going to anticipate that anxiety. And there's 3 ways that we can overcome this almost straight away. So I've already said SMS marketing the results. Most important thing that you can do. And we have the fitting templates, which I'll get to in just a second and show you those. With your accolades, with your recommendations, with your testimonials, whatever you choose to call them. On Property Marketer, we have a program. It's being updated. Even the ones on here are a bit outdated, but by what's today? Wednesday, I think Friday, it's all good to go. And you're able to share these into social media channels. If you're able to take it one step further and put them into margin ads on Facebook or the like, and people are searching real estate, not pups in the margin, a pair of your clients talking about the fact that you had overcome the adversity and got them moved and got the property behind them. No mention of price, that you've actually physically allowed them to get on with their plans. That will resonate with incumbent sellers. That will calm them down. That will relieve the anxiety, and that will have them coming on board. So SMS marketing results and social media accolades or recommendations. And the third one is what we call welcome to view websites. So you see, I believe, if not already, there's going to need to be an alternative to large marketing packages, and certainly the likes of the online giants, your REA, your Domain. People, it's not whether or not they are interested in the market, it's not whether or not they see it as an investment. I don't think they will have the preparedness to hand over large sums of money with no assurance of selling. And I think we have to start looking at different ways to generate that inquiry. Please don't call it an off-market listing. Anything that's on the market is on the market, and I don't care in what capacity. We shouldn't be calling them off-market listings. we might just come up with a fancy name for a fancy marketing package. I'm talking to leaders about this quite regularly. I'm saying to leaders and owners of real estate businesses, don't play the online game with real estate domain or the big portals. Start to think how you can connect with buyer inquiry through clever advertising in mediums that are relatively inexpensive to generate inquiry. Again, I say it to stockpile, in this case, the buyers. So restore confidence with evidence of sales activity. So you imagine that you've had 3 agents in and they've all talked speculatively about the price you're going to get. One of them's either overly inflated it. Another one's promised the world, with how they're going to pay for the marketing, whatever the case might be. But then there's you, this agent, who's regularly texting, SMS texting sales that are made in real time. Can you see from that incumbent seller's perspective, they see those sales coming in, that tells them that you're doing it. This can jockey you up from maybe being a third or a second choice well into the clear as the outright winner, the agent of choice that they're going to run with. The second way is your accolades and pushing those through. And then the third, or the accolades I just mentioned, is through what we call the individual property websites, which you've just heard me mention. So SMS marketing results, social media accolades on your property marketer. If you're not on it already, please load that up so that you can be sharing these with great regularity. And you're welcome to view websites. This is the new format that's just about to come out. It looks absolutely superb on the mobile phone. And yes, we're going to have the capacity to market these. So first up with the SMS marketing and the results, to push these out there. So we've got all of those. You just jump into SALEStrainer, you drop down in that box, go into aids. You'll there find the SMS marketing of your results in there. The templates are already preordained. As you make sales, just be texting them out. I would most likely be doing these every 48 hours. If I had that many sales, they could be your office sales or otherwise. This relieves the anxiety from a seller who looks like coming on the market or is he on the market. If they're seeing evidence of other properties being sold, this heartens them to believe that they're a chance as well, and they won't withdraw. If nothing else, it'll mitigate those. With the accolades, I can tell you that accolade's way too wordy. Seb, you might be on here or one of your crew. Try to keep them to around 20 words, maybe 30 words at a peak. And we call them a snippet. You just want them to be short and sweet. So less is more. The important thing is this photograph here. That's the one that on this Facebook sharing that just makes all the difference. So you share them in the first instance to your seller that you've just sold the property for, and then ask that seller to share them onto their Facebook pages, to all the buyers that you might have spoken to. This isn't okay for buyers to see evidence of sales being made. This heightens their confidence to go out there and do something because they see others doing it. There's nothing to be lost by promoting heavily on social media your accolades, your recommendations, your testimonials, and absolutely everything to be gained. So there's a few different variations. Now, with the two-view websites, they drive inquiry directly back to your office. We believe these have a massive future in social media margin ads, if we can get them to graft, mainly because the algorithms of these social media platforms allow you to promote those properties specifically to geographic precincts in and around your property that you might be advertising. I think this is remarkable. I think this is a pure winner, and it becomes even more powerful in prospecting when you distribute it out to a number of channels and you reach the point where it does sell and you change the wording on that ad, because it'll have a drop-down box from the asking price to sold. This will then generate seller inquiry and create fantastic continuity for you going forward. The process of managing expectations. This is again in the middle or at the front end, if you like, of anticipation, and that is having strong conversations when you list a property. Now, I've rewritten part of this so that it is relevant to the current market as it stands, but you simply must sit with an owner and prepare them for the journey ahead. And this can be initiated by and large. We're just talking about some things that you see here. You know, I'm on your side. Always remember this. Talk to me. If something's bothering you, give me a call. Don't stew on it. Let it explode. Keep your eyes on the surprise. What was your reason for selling again? They say it to me. I'm one of my wonderful techniques. They'd say, would you mind writing that down for me in my journal in big block capital letters, just so I can be clear on it? This causes them to write that motive and feed it back to themselves. So more on that in just a second. So all these things that you prepare them for, inclusive of how the pricing would work, when we will need to engage with price reductions. If you get clever at this in conversation, you can control the price expectation of the listing right up to sold. And don't think about that owner that you've been least cooperative with. That's most likely because you didn't make deposits in something I'm going to share with you in just a few moments, the emotional bank account. And that's when you get cut off at the legs. So anticipating the motive, the next thing we do is understand how a motive's made up. Now, most agents stop at this first question. They say, what or where are you trying to go or do? They get the answer and they say, that'll do me. That's their reason for selling. Understand this. Their first knee-jerk response that they give you as an estate agent is typically the superficial motive. It's not the real motive that sits at the core, which I refer to as the emotional dominant reason. That's the emotion one. That's the one that sits in the heart. That's the real reason that they're making the move. The second component, and what I like to share with you here, is that motives work in layers. Why am I spending so much time on motive? Because over the next, I reckon, half a decade at least, this is going to be tantamount to your success. Your ability to glean the information around motive, your ability to get them communicating with you openly and honestly about that motive is what preeminent agents focus on. You see, if you can have sellers coming to you, with a duty of responsibility to actually get property sold, if you can get them coming to you because they just look at you and the capacity in that which you're operating in and are attracted to it because of the open, honest advice that you've been given, you're untouchable. So the second layer is, why would they want to do this now? Now, when I'm talking to a seller, remembering that discovering or uncovering a motive is a searching process. It's not a interrogation. It's not, what are you trying to do? Why would you want to do that? You don't ask all of these questions at the same time, and definitely not in the same way. So I always get the superficial motive. What are you trying to get? What or where are you trying to go or do? They'll always give me that. The second one might come up a week after, sometimes in the first week, depending upon how the relationship's building, where I'll say to a seller, why on earth did you want to do that? And I'm waiting, I'm hoping they're going to push back. Those sellers that get hostile with me when I ask the question, what are you trying to do, or why would you want to go there? They go, because. And they sort of spout out. That to me is music to the ears. In the same way when we were talking about buyers last week, and I said that initial qualifiers, I'm sorry, do you want to buy a house? And they go, well, of course I do. This is the real estate agency, isn't it stupid? I'm hoping for the same thing with a seller when I talk to them about their motive and I get them to reiterate. They go, why would you want to do that with an almost screwed up, disinterested face? And they bark back at me. That tells me that that is indeed a seller that's ready to rock and roll now. So very much interested in them. And the final part, the final ingredient, the final component, there's three of them that make up the motive, is, when does this have to be done by? When do you have to have the property sold? A lot of agents fail to ask this, and they don't see that in direct correlation with what I share with you in and around the timeline. That too can be a problem. Why do we want to know this motive? Why do we want an answer to those three questions? Because if we understand the motive, we can then easily categorize those listings into specific classes. An A-grade listing is one where they know what or where they're trying to go or do. They know why they're trying to do it, and they have a deadline. That to me is music to my ears, in that I say that's a property that absolutely must sell within the next 3 months. And anyone that's worked with me would know that that's what I focus upon. I focus on the low hanging fruit and go after it hard as quickly as possible. The second class is where those people would say, well, look, we can't find something to buy, we haven't found something to move to, or we're not real sure what we're doing. Yeah. But we would sell if we got a certain amount. So these sellers, I say very clearly, are, the ones where I say they would sell if the right circumstance prevailed. These need a reason at the other end. You're not going to see as many of these in the market as you would in recent years, but I can almost assure you that you're going to see a quantity of them. The C-class listing, despite all efforts to move these out of the marketplace, and I wouldn't be moving them out anyway because I still say that the sign dictates presence, there will still be a smattering of them, what I call the uneducated idiot. They don't want to be educated, that might sell their property if the price is offered and you hear the price that they want and you almost want to cringe. Still take it on. We still need presence in the marketplace, so long as you haven't been a fool and committed to a price and just given a broad estimation or a vague estimation, as I like to call it, then you're still on the way. It's still all going to work. So now we move into communication. So we've anticipated, we're now understanding how a motive works. We know those three layers. What are we trying to go or do? Yep. Why would you want to do that? When does this have to be done by? And then we can categorize those listings. Now, you can do a quick inventory check if you like, but in most instances, 20% of your listings are typically in Class A. You'll find that'll jump to maybe 30 to as much as 50%, but you have to go and engage in conversations to find out whether or not this is the case with each of those owners. So we say to communicate responsibly, we must ask ourselves a question. Ask ourselves a question regarding our property sellers, and we need to focus on giving advice, not price. Please don't make the procurement of listings around you giving a market appraisal. Be honest and say, I don't know. The question I have for you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is this though. What is it that you are trying to do? Then open the receptors up and listen, because from what they say, you can confidently formulate a game plan. And in formulating that game plan, here comes the key. This is what I've understood since about 1989 and been able to do with extraordinary success by simply understanding this analogy. You see, I say that every seller, every person for that matter, but we'll stick to the context of sellers here, every seller that you list, the moment that you do, you open up with them what I call an emotional bank account. What is that? Well, that's the relationship that you two forge, or three as the case might be, built around, it's the relationship that you put together, built around deposits and withdrawals that are made with each other. You see, as time goes on, as far as that relationship is concerned, you're going to want to make withdrawals. There's going to be pretty much, as the market stands, bad news on price, bad news on buyers gone missing in action, all sorts of stuff. And your ability to not fall into any form of confrontation or be argumentative or whatever the case might be, even criticism with those sellers, is reliant upon whether or not you've made these deposits in their emotional bank account. So what are those deposits? How do we go ahead and make those? Well, we focus in very rapid fire fashion. So I've already said to you that we're going to be calling them twice a day. And we look at a whole range of angles in communication as to how we communicate with them. So the good news is, once we discuss these angles, that we've got a lot of these call subjects pre-written up for you. They're preordained, ready to go. But what I say in communication is be very careful not to pursue the same path all the time, especially now as it relates to price. It appears to me the most often frequented angle that most sellers use. Some use it exclusively. It's the only angle they use in giving feedback to their sellers is on price. They're very subjective, and they're giving this information or giving their opinion, I should say, on price, which is only going to cause a breakdown. Now, to my mind, that's like just coming home, you've forgotten your keys, you're trying to get into the front door, you realize it's locked. What do you do? Well, I've found that we try to check whether it's really locked. We go in, put a bit of shoulder in and say, is it really locked? We stand back from it. What's the next course of action? This one really cracks me up. We don't believe it was actually locked. We just want to check it one more time. So this time we give it plenty of shoulder. Yet we still discover it's locked. Now, if you did that, if you came home and suddenly left your keys out, you couldn't get through the front door, what would you do? Do you persist with the front door? Of course you don't. You try the back door. If that doesn't work, you try a window. If that doesn't work, you might lift the roof tile, and the story goes on. But in any event, you don't give up. You start to explore different angles. I say communication is just the same. What about timing? What about just demonstrating care? What about just calling and talking about the fact that you love the way the property was presented to perhaps the wife, if she's the one that's preparing it? Yes, we do have to talk about price, but to my mind, it takes pretty much a back seat with my full leg 6. Oops, a daisy. What about the information on the market that they're currently in, or more importantly, where they're looking to go? What about just demonstrating simple empathy? So many times I've done this where I've just called someone who's had just showing clear-cut empathy. I've brought buyers through the property, had a good inspection, or maybe a bad inspection. In either way, nothing's come of it. And then I just simply ring the owner and say, listen, I just want to thank you for the way the property's been presented. I'm sorry that I don't have someone, but I tell you what, it just blew me away yet again how well presented that property is. And you're just making my job so very easy to fulfill. It's that appreciative line that can make all the difference. Now, probably not the right line to be using in the market we're going into, but I hope you get the gist of where we're going with it. And what about the emotive? What about feeding that motive, their reason for selling, back to them over and over and over again? So I'm going to reiterate this because some of you might just be going, look at this, oh, wow, he's just banging the same door. Well, I'm not. What I'm saying to you is you have to look at the frequency of communication, then you have to look at the quality of the communication, and you have to take a vested interest in these owners where you're calling them a couple of times a day. Do that, and we can start to move into greener pastures. So those call subjects, they fall under SALEStrainer. You go into aids, you will then look down and look up call subjects for great communication, and you can see a bunch of examples that we've got there, many of which are just being finalized before they go into the COVID-19 arsenal for you. And here's a smattering of them. Weekend sales reports are up here. It will tell you what the call is physically about. And here it gives you the words, which if you choose to use them verbatim, I am perfectly okay with. That's why we did it in the first place, to just make things easier for you. So now moving into the final furlong, I just want to talk about trust. So we've talked about the frequency of communication, calling them twice a day, establishing the motive, searching for that motive so you understand the hot buttons. Now I want to take the first step into managing the seller's expectation around price. If you look back on the buyers one, I talked about buyers coming in and how we manage those sellers with the sowing of a seed. Well, here are some seeds I would like to see you sow yourself. So I say that when I'm talking to a seller, now this might be at least week 1, more likely somewhere in between week 1 and week 2, I will hit this with this question. I'll say, what are you going to do if this doesn't work out? Now, this would just be a general call to those sellers. It's usually the very first time they've ever heard me speak negatively. For obvious reasons, I come down there as a salesperson, the eternal optimist. I'm trying to win their favor, to win their listing through a listing presentation. So, of course, I'm upbeat, optimistic, having a lot of fun to actually lure them over. Yeah. And these are all the things that they hear leading up to signing the agreement. But life goes on, and they've probably never heard you speak so dourly, but it really does reach a point where you can't keep blue skying them, and you've got to have that impact where it's like, a bit of a sledgehammer to the forehead. And I just go, what are you going to do if this doesn't work out? Now, I've had all manner of responses to this enticement, from, well, it has to work out, said very calmly, through to, well, we'll just take it off the market and wait for the market to catch up. Either or, it's still a good question to ask, because it directly contrasts you from how you've been before, and it quite often solicits the answer to their motive in an almost where they haven't realised that they've done so. So I say, what are you going to do if this doesn't work out? And they go, well, it has to work out. That's music to my ears. If they start freaking out and say, well, what am I going to do to make it work out? All of those behaviours tell me that they are looking at selling, and I'm comfortable with that. I then follow it up with a second, well, I call it the hypothetical seed, by then asking this next very important question. I say, what would you do if I had a buyer at? And the figure that I give them is typically well below what I initially thought the property would sell for at the very least, or may have even thought that it's still going to sell for. I put the ball in their court, and I said, what would you do if I had a buyer at X amount of dollars? And again, the range of receptiveness to that can vary. They might explode. And they might go, oh, take it off the market. I said, well, calm down. Why? I didn't say I had a buyer. I said, what would you do if I had a buyer? So some of you will be hearing this for the first time, but I can tell you this dialogue is fairly simplistic. If utilised the right way, it does amazing things pretty much overnight. Well, literally overnight. Because that's the time period I ask you to leave them. I ask you to leave it for the evening and speak to them the next day, because typically, the next day they've managed to digest it, make a decision on it. And in any event, they've calmed down if they're a bit angry and taken stock of the situation. So they do what I refer to as, they've spent the night staring at the ceiling, thinking it over. So that initial shock value is important, in that you're not doing it to deceive. You're just giving it an opinion, and you're floating that opinion, and that can lead to a whole lot of positive ramifications and positive outcomes in the scheme of things. So I sow that hypothetical seed by asking. Now, there's a whole range of other things that we can do, and we will do that when I move into the reducing to sell specifically. But at the moment, this is all I really want you to do. And hopefully you'll do it on the back of having called them 3 or 4 times a week. And probably in the first week, make sure you've had those first 3 days where you've got those calls out before you jump into this. But basically, if I had a property on the market that was on at 520 and I thought it really had to come back to about 480, I would say that hypothetical seed. What would you do if I had a buyer at 380? And I'd just watch how they react. Yeah. Sometimes they don't even need to watch. It's just the act of having done it. They go away, they digest it, they come back, they're realistic, they're set to go. In any event, you must be sowing seeds. And as I like to say, tucking my owners into bed with a number every day. All right. Now, last but not least, this is an important discussion. I'll try to slow this down. I ask that when you do get the recording to this, that you spend some time poring over it and understand how the equity discussion works. Now, I'm just going to use some fairly broad-based numbers, but it's a discussion that you need to have. You cannot have this discussion if you haven't forged the relationship. So first and foremost, you have to have built the relationship to a point where you can have this discussion. That might require at least a week of making these calls with great regularity. But basically, the first question I ask is, I'll say to them, how much do you owe on the property? If they've been reluctant about reducing the price, if they've been reluctant about selling, if they've been reluctant about location, all of the things that could go wrong. I'll just say to them, having built that relationship, if you don't mind me asking, how much do you owe on it? And it's the answer to that question that can either set up a listing to sell now or delay one for later. But in any event, it's the type of information we need to empower people to make informed decisions. I ask them how much they owe. And then I'll say, look, if you take a mortgage relief, if they say yes, I believe you can safely add 12 months repayments on whatever they might be capitalized on that loan. So let me give you a working example and let me show you where I'm going with this. Let's say I've got an owner that has a property. I'll use the example I just recently used for that one I referred. And the owner said, I said, how much do you owe? And in this instance, they said, bearing in mind the property's value is estimated at around 750. Yeah. So it's estimated at 750, and let's say they owe 500. So they've got, what's that, 2/3 equity, 66% equity. And then I say to them, okay, you're going to repay. So I would assume that a $500,000 loan would be about $2,500, I would imagine, per month, which is basically $30,000 per annum. Now, I believe that the way this market, the way it's going to go, anyone that misses the boat now and takes mortgage relief, it's probably going to be a good 12 months. So that means that at the end of that 12 months, that 500 they owe is now 530. So I say that will capitalize. They go, yeah. So now you owe 530 on a property where you started at a value of 750. Yeah. So that kind of gives you $220,000 equity. Now, if the market, so we have the if, then if the market sheds 10 to 20% equity, where does that leave us? So at 750, if it sheds 20% equity, wow, that's 150,000, which means it's now worth 600. Then we take away the 30,000, which means it's worth 570. And then we've got a property that needs to go to market where our equity has been diminished from what was 250,000 to 240,000. Now, there's going to be loads of variations around this. Some are going to be tighter. You're going to have people that say, well, I bought it, it's worth 500. I only borrowed 200, or I borrowed 300. Yeah. Well, they're going to be in a worst case scenario, because the more they've borrowed, what I say to them is, you are merely protecting the lender's equity. You're merely protecting the bank's equity by hanging on. The sooner you get the property on the market, yeah, or the sooner you actually entertain the idea of lowering your asking price so that we can get a sale and you can move on, because you're trying to mitigate a loss that isn't actually there, the less likely you are to diminish your equity. You actually, at the moment though, you are clearly giving your own equity away. Now, this discussion needs to take place, and it needs to be done in an empathetic fashion, because from it, you are going to be in a position where sellers, no matter what you say here, are going to say, no, we don't believe that that's ever going to get that bad. We'll wait till the market recovers. Wish them well. The idea is to empower them to make their own decision on their own behalf. All we want to do at this early stage is dig deeper into the motive to get an understanding, but also to explain that with the economic condition right now, hanging on could spell disaster, and most likely will if you can't sustain your way through that bubble. So there is a mass variation on stabilising the sellers in the equation and how it works around specifically reducing prices. That will be the subject fodder for another presentation or another example of this. But at the moment, what we want to do is anticipate, importantly, get them stabilized, make sure they see activity out there in the marketplace, start to advertise, but build that buyer list in tandem with the seller list. Communicate with them. Communication is not what you say, it's what's understood. It's the frequency of communication. And in our instance, it's the successful transfer of relevant market information, and build yourself into that trust zone, into that trust volume, where you can most literally control the transaction, but you have to build that up by making those deposits into that emotional bank account before you can make withdrawals. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope that gives you a framework. Certainly anyone that's on here that wants to jump online with me, have a chat so we can formulate a plan of action specifically around this, feel free to give me a call, feel free to give me a buzz, and I look forward to the next installment of List and Sell Online with you all.